Thank you all. I'm a new recruit to Tommy Linasari's lab. I inherited the stewardship of the UNB component of this project midway through it. There's a chance there will be gaps in my knowledge, including knowledge of the fish. I come from a catchment where there's only 4 freshwater fish before I came here. I might mispronounce names. Please come and correct me over lunch or that sort of thing. So before I go on, I want to actually give my acknowledgements first. So UNB and the Canadian Rivers Institute, to Angotan Resource Management, to Miramichi Salmon Association, to Atlantic Salmon Federation, to our funders, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and to Ocean Tracking Network. None of this research will be possible without the contributions of all of these organizations. So to any representatives of you that are here today, thank you very much in advance. Okay, and I've had an exceptional welcome from Tommy's lab and from his family as well. Thank you all. Okay, business. Atlantic salmon are declining. They are declining, so you don't need me to tell you that in the Miramichi, Atlantic salmon are declining. This is not a Miramichi specific phenomenon. They are declining across the Atlantic. You could make this type of graph from almost anywhere where they come. So this is from the catchment where I was before. You see pretty much the same thing going on. Now it's a complex suite of pressures that come to bear on this. Some are global, some are local. Pollution, climate change, dams, in some places aquaculture, changes to land use. All of these things have a role. But there is this chance that in the Miramichi at the moment, there may be something unique, a pressure that at the moment only applies to the Miramichi, and this is striped bass, and more specifically, the recovery of striped bass from its virtual extirpation to one of the most outstanding conservation success stories in freshwater fish biology. Now, what does this mean for Atlantic salmon? Now, the issue potentially is from this overlap, this temporal and spatial overlap of two of the critical life history stages of both of these fish, where they are in the same small space in the same short period of time, and that space is very physically constricted. Now, it would not be an issue if the salmon were pristine. They were coexisting long before people came. So if there is an issue, the issue is because the Atlantic salmon are already being trashed across the Atlantic. So the study system, the Miramichi, don't need to tell you about that. The striped bass come they're coming in now, but through May, into late May, and there's some that go down into the southwest, but the real concentrated spawning areas and these aggregations between the red bank and eel ground areas. Meanwhile, at the same time, including as we know over the last couple of days from MSA's smolt wheels in the Miramichi, the smolt are on their way. Next week's going to be warm, so there could be a big plow through of them. And the question is, what does the striped bass, what happens to that last arrow as a result of passing through the striped bass areas? Striped bass are not small fish, and they are quite capable of gobbling a smolt up in pretty much one bite. And so a lot of the smolts are passing through this area here, where the geomorphology of the river acts to really concentrate. I've been told that this is a great wonder of nature in its own right, where the river is wall to wall striped bass, where there's more bass than there is water, and that water is chock full of bass gametes. So how do we study this interaction? So we have got the various census traps and other census techniques that are going along. This matters because we need to know when the pulses of the movement are. when the bats are really hitting there, when the smolts are really hitting there, and when other potential prey sources are potentially hitting there for the bass as well. And I will come back to that at the end, because there's a piece of information that I'd like to get a lot of it, to have ideas coming in from ways that we could get it. So yeah, MSA smolt wheels. Diet studies. So a lot of you will be familiar with DFO's survey of striped bass stomach contents. That's also been followed up a bit in this paper, and anybody who was out during striped bass season last year will likely have interacted with Ali Pugh's follow-up work on that, where she was studying dissecting stomachs from striped bass. Yeah, you might have seen her on the riverbank, cutting them open and looking for smolts in their stomachs, but also looking at what else they're eating and when. And they don't find, if you go out there and you catch a striped bass and you open it up to see if it's got a smolt, you'll, like, less than 1% to 2% of them that you catch will have a smolt in their stomach, based on DFO's work, based on Ali's work. But then we also have the acoustic telemetry option. These are these tags that emit a ping, that a unique coded ping that those pings are picked up either on by active tracking with hydrophones or by static hydrophones put in place, so we can monitor where fish are and when. So ASF have done some work, some good work already with acoustic telemetry, where they've tracked these fish and they've classified them into predated, unpredated by the paths of the tags. Now, where we are extending, and in that they found that actually there is more predation than you might expect based on just that diet study, but it's spatially and temporally variable. In some parts, it can be as low as 2%, and in some parts, in some years, it can be as high as 20% predation on smolts. So we are now extending ASF's work by using these predation-sensing acoustic telemetry tags. These are tags that, when they are done, you implant them into your smolt or your other study species in the usual way. When the carrier of that tag is eaten and digested, the tag will tell you that it's been eaten and digested, and it will give you an idea of, it will tell you roughly when, actually it'll tell you pretty precisely when, the sooner that you catch it. It's not infallible, it's not a complete replacement for anything else. So the other way that we're extending what ASF have done is to also tag pre-smolts in the autumn. Everybody, I'm sure, knows that smolts are extremely delicate during the smolt migration period, and there is always the risk of the handling, that the tagging may increase the mortality of the ones that you're tagging and handling, whether that's direct mortality in the few days afterwards, or whether it makes them dopey and groggy and leads to them being more likely to get swallowed. So I'm just going to present you with some of the stories, individual level stories of fish that we're able to tell with these things. Now, in an ideal world, so you're about to see a set of figures that look like this. You've got the river distance on the y-axis, you've got time on the x-axis. This is all coming from last year's tagging campaign. We've got another one going on to give you a rough, this is roughly what those various lines correspond to. All of this is being done in Northwest. So this is a successful smolt, a smolt that has escaped and got out to sea. So it was tagged by ASF in Weirton, and in 9 days from Weirton, it got out past Lochiville. And yeah, quite a lot of them do this. When a fish has been predated, this is the type of track that you would see. So you can see there that it makes lots of reversals, it makes lots of stops, and that red blob where it changes is where the tag has told us the inferred predation event has taken place. So in this case, it's just upstream of Red Bank. This is another form that a predation one. Now, I'm prepared to guess that tag has probably come out the back end or out the front end of the bass that ate it, if it wasn't the bass that ate it, because I don't think the bass would have sat still for that long. Here we have a fish that almost made it, got gobbled at the last. This is actually one of our autumn tagged ones, so the dotted line is there because it actually came from Little Southwest. There's a lot of filtering. It's not black and white. I said that there's always a bit of noise. So this one, it looks like it was predated, but it could be a false tripping because it's actually pretty swift movement through. There's always a chance it didn't get picked up at Logiville because there's not 100% detection efficiency.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. This one has a suspiciously long pause, meaning it might be a false negative. It might have been predated. We have ones where we have to look out for natural mortality, and we have to factor natural mortality into how we derive our final estimates. So preliminary results, fish tagged in autumn 2020, we put 71. We saw 23 of them make it through to the smolt run. I don't think that's an atypical survival rate for that particular life history stage. Of those 23, 19 of them had their predation sensors tripped. Fish tagged in spring of 2021, ASF and Angotan put 53 tags out. We probably got at least 6 of them as natural mortality as a result because we didn't see them again. Of those 47 that we had on the receivers, we had 26 of them tripped. So bear in mind that these are also coming from different arms of the Northwest Mirror machine. So these are the critical caveats. The timing of the runs on the autumn and spring tagged streams were different. The ones that came in the autumn moved a bit later. Because of that, they may be being more vulnerable to bass predation. That may be why we see this 19 out of 23. There's also, though, evidence in there that there may be some predation going on from other sources, potentially from mammals. There's even one track that looks like it might have been taken by an osprey because it suddenly jumps between major branches, and it would have had to have evaded a ton of detections. And then that estimate for the spring is probably an underestimate of the actual predation because there's some of those tagged traces look like they might be natural mortality where the fish died a few days later. So future directions, we have another tagging campaign. We tagged in the autumn, ASF and Angotan are tagging for us again at the moment. We've got to do that hardcore QCing of the data that I just shown you. ASF are tagging parallel to us. They're not using the predation tags, but what they are doing is putting out a lot more of the regular tags because they cost quite a bit less than the predation tags, and they're putting them out over a much wider area. So these are parallel, they're complementary. We're looking to do simulations parameterized from the data, simulating what happened, the relative risks to smolts from tracks of bat by using the information that we're gaining from tracking of bass, from tracking of smolts, and from other sources that we can get as well. And the big one that I really want to get other people to help me out on, really like a good proxy of the smelt run. This is a big unknown because the size of the smelt run, when it peaks, where it peaks, this could be a really critical factor in the relative risk to smolts. If the smolts are passing when there's a big pulse of smelting, then there's a chance that that issue might be diluted. Whereas if the smolts are passing just after the smelt run has peaked and dropped off, well, you could have a lot of hungry bass there ready to gobble smolts. So we're not after estimates of the actual numbers, but we would really like to know the shape of the peak, when it peaks, how quickly it peaks, how quickly it drops off. So if anybody has ideas on how we might get good estimates of that, I'd be very grateful for that. Because they are the big thing that Ali found in their stomachs. So thank you, and watch this space.